I never thought my own son would look me in the eye and tell me I was done like a piece of furniture he could haul out to the curb whenever it suited him. It was the moment I realized something in our family had been quietly rotting for years, and I had ignored every sign. If you've ever faced a moment when someone you love crossed a line you didn't know existed, tell me your story in the comments. Coming out of the anesthesia felt like wading through heavy mud. My chest throbbed from the surgery, every breath catching on the stitches beneath the dressing. The monitors hummed somewhere nearby, steady but distant, like they belonged to another patient altogether. A slip of folded paper sat on the tray beside my bed, placed there with a kind of deliberate care. Marissa, the night nurse, had left it before ending her shift. The message was short. Be careful. Someone tried to use your condition to sign paperwork about your assets. A few scattered memories drifted through Evan, insisting on speaking to a doctor alone. Lydia pressing her badge at the front desk, as if she worked there. Their voices had a certain urgency, a sharp tone wrapped in concern. Reaching for my phone took more effort than expected. The screen lit up, and the passcode prompt showed multiple failed attempts. Lydia must have tried while I was unconscious. She usually waited for me to unlock it when she needed something never tried on her own. That detail caught at me. It didn't fit the rhythm of our usual interactions. Marissa returned briefly with a small folder. Thought you might want to see this before rounds start, she murmured. Inside lay a copy of a capacity evaluation request. Evan's name was listed as the person who initiated it. The timestamp was just after midnight, long before anyone had told me the surgery had gone well. He hadn't asked. He hadn't even hinted he planned anything like this. My fingers paused at the bottom of the page where a signature appeared, mine, supposedly. The shape resembled my handwriting, but the curve of the M was off. The line slanted too sharply. It looked like someone trying to imitate confidence rather than convey it. Instead of confronting anyone, I asked Marissa to bring my temporary chart. She didn't question it, just nodded, and stepped out, leaving me with the steady hum of the machines. Minutes later, images of the questionable documents filled my camera roll. Each photo revealed another detail that didn't belong, another small betrayal hidden behind polite smiles and practiced concern. When I finally looked up the hallway outside, my room stretched long and bare, the kind of space that forces a man to take stock of how he ended up there. My mind drifted to the years after my wife passed. Evan had barely stepped out of high school, angry, withdrawn, and carrying more weight than he knew how to hold. We leaned on each other because there was no one else. I remembered standing in his doorway some nights, just to reassure myself we'd both survive the grief. Somewhere along the way, the ground between us shifted, and I hadn't seen it happen. I set the phone down and typed a message to my old attorney. Only 6 words need to see you today. After lunch, they moved me to a recovery room, tucked away from the constant movement of staff. Their faces showed the expected concern, soft voices, measured steps, the kind of expressions people reserve for someone fresh out of surgery. But beneath that practiced sympathy, something else lingered. Something firm. Something already decided. Evan stepped closer. Dad, we should talk about your medical directives. It'll help everyone if we get the paperwork squared away. Lydia chimed in before I could answer. And the financial side, too. Emergencies like this show why families need a clear plan. We can help streamline everything. She placed a folder on the rolling table as if presenting a proposal at work. The pages were clipped together. Too neat. Too timely. Both of them watched for my reaction, waiting for compliance rather than participation. Their voices carried a certain cadence. Not once did either of them ask how I felt or whether the pain had eased. That shift hit harder than expected. Somewhere along the line, concern had morphed into control. A few minutes later, my sister-in-law called. She rarely contacted me during the day, yet her tone held the same strange certainty. "Caleb, honey, let the kids handle things. They told us you've been confused lately. Just sign whatever helps them help you." She meant well, but the words pricked. Confused. The rumor had already spread. Another call followed, this time from a cousin who lived 3 states away. "Evan says you need support making tough decisions. Don't fight him. He's doing the right thing. No one accused me outright of losing clarity. They simply repeated what they'd heard." That subtle spread of doubt created an odd pressure, the kind that leaves a man questioning his footing, even when he knows exactly where he stands. Evan slid another document toward me. "This is a temporary medical power of attorney, just to make things easier for the next week or 2. My hand stopped midway. Something about that single sheet, its crisp edges, the signature line, waiting for my name, made the room feel smaller. Signing it would shift a boundary that had stayed intact through grief recession and every argument Evan and I ever had. The simple act of touching the pen felt wrong. To ease the tension, Lydia leaned in with a warm smile. "It's routine, really. We just want to keep you safe." The same smile had once charmed half our neighborhood. In this room, it carried a faint trace of insistence, a nudge toward surrender. Keeping calm seemed the only way forward. Any hint of anger would feed the idea that I wasn't thinking clearly. So I pushed the papers back gently, pretending fatigue. "Not now. Later." They exchanged a glance. Lydia whispered something to Evan before they both stepped aside to check their phones. That gave me a moment to breathe. Marissa entered soon after, knocking lightly. "Just checking on you. How's the pain?" Her presence cut through the tension. She assessed my vitals, then lowered her voice. "If you need copies of your records, anything you want to keep off the main system, let me know. I can help." A brief nod was all I managed, but she seemed to understand. The offer wasn't casual. It came from someone who had seen this pattern before. People pushed to sign things before they were ready. People pressured by the ones closest to them. Once she left, the room felt full again. Evan pacing Lydia, typing both, speaking about what made sense, and prevented confusion down the line. They discussed my future, as if I weren't sitting between them, listening to each assumption, each quiet presumption of authority. A strange kind of solitude settled in. Not the emptiness of being alone, but the deeper isolation that comes when surrounded by people who have already rewritten the story without you. Every suggestion they made arrived wrapped in politeness, but each one carried the same direction: surrender control. Instead of confronting them, I asked for something simple. "Could you get me every document the hospital has on me, the stuff from the night of the surgery, and anything you two requested while I was under?" They didn't respond right away. Lydia froze, fingers still mid-text. Evan turned, slowly studying me with a cautious look, the way a person examines a pet that suddenly bares teeth. Why, he asked. Because I want them. No raised voice, no argument, just a statement. That alone shifted the air. He left to find a nurse, and Lydia attempted small talk, though her gaze kept drifting to the folder I hadn't touched. Every so often she glanced at my phone, probably wondering whether I'd discovered the failed passcode attempts. A clerk arrived a few minutes after Evan returned and handed over a stack of papers. The bundle felt heavier than it should have. Scanning through the first few pages showed forms I'd never seen, permissions I would never grant, timestamps, marking hours when I couldn't even sit up. More copies would be needed later, but this was enough for now. Evan cleared his throat. "We're trying to help you. Don't make this difficult." My thumb tapped the edge of one document as I kept looking through the stack. The pages rustled under my hand, steady and familiar, each one holding another small piece of the truth I'd need. A young resident stopped by mid-afternoon to check the incision site. He flipped through my chart, nodded once, then muttered something almost offhanded. Your son was persistent about that capacity evaluation last night. Kept asking where to sign it. Persistent. The word tightened something in my chest, far sharper than the surgical pain. He said it casually, unaware he'd dropped a stone straight into deep water. My hand stayed still on the blanket, yet a cold thread worked down my back. Evan hadn't hesitated. He'd pushed while I was barely breathing on my own. The doctor continued updating my record, unaware of the effect his remark had left behind. I thanked him, though the words sounded strange coming out of my mouth. While he walked out, my phone buzzed on the table. A neighbor from Eastmoreland, Tom Reeves, the kind man who always borrowed my ladder, had sent a message. Heard Evan's taking over your accounts. Guess the paperwork's almost done. Glad you're keeping things in the family. Almost done. I hadn't agreed to anything. Not a signature. Not a conversation. Surely Tom must have misunderstood. Then again, gossip rarely grows from thin air. Someone had told him. Someone confident enough to brag. A pressure rose in my throat. Maybe I'd been too strict with Evan. Maybe he felt cornered by bills or expectations. Those familiar excuses surfaced because they always did, my habit of softening his choices, carrying the weight for him. Then the signature on the evaluation form came back to me. That crooked attempt to mimic my handwriting. The wavering stroke where mine had never wavered. The image cut through every doubt. Evan and Lydia returned with a nurse following them. Evan spoke first. We need to limit random visitors. Too many interruptions. The nurse glanced at me, waiting. Evan stepped in before I could answer. Just apply the restriction. Immediate family only. His certainty threw her off. She checked the chart, nodded, and updated the note. Marisa would be blocked now because he said so. A protective spark flared. She had only tried to help. He erased her with a single instruction. Lydia adjusted the small router beside the TV. I changed your Wi-Fi password. The old one was too simple. Someone could have accessed your email. Her tone stayed pleasant, but she typed fast and kept the screen angled away. She didn't share the new password. This wasn't caution. It was control. My energy drained quickly, though it didn't feel medical. It felt engineered, one door after another quietly removed. When they left, I pulled the folder from under the blanket and photographed each document, the evaluation request, the shaky signature, the bank form, dated wrong. My thumb worked steadily until everything was recorded. A moment to breathe, then the plan shaped itself. Doubt hovered at the edges, age-stress memory, but the evidence refused to blur. Once the photos uploaded, I sent an email to my lawyer with a single subject line. Urgent. Review all attachments. No explanation needed. Next, I opened a notes file and started a straightforward log times comments who entered what they pushed me to sign. Entry by entry, the picture sharpened. Shifting in bed, an ache moved through my ribs. A man can prepare for surgery or for getting older. What he can't prepare for is betrayal from the very people he once held upright. Late the next morning, they walked in carrying a thick binder and an air of authority that didn't belong in a recovery room. Evan set the binder on my table like he was handing over a legal summons. We need to finalize these, he said. Dad already agreed months ago, Lydia added. This is just the last round of signatures before everything transfers smoothly. Months ago, no such conversation had ever taken place. They both knew it. The binder opened to a stack of financial documents, account transfers, beneficiary updates, property notes, all formatted neatly. Too neatly. Someone had invested time preparing this. Someone had expected no resistance. I kept my hands still. Walk me through each page. They seemed surprised I wasn't reaching for the pen. Evan began flipping through tabs with growing impatience. Every explanation he offered felt thin, padded with phrases like routine adjustments and long-term planning. Lydia nodded along as though playing a role she'd practiced. "And this one?" I asked, tapping the page that mirrored the forged signature style. Evan's jaw tightened. "It's part of the transition. Don't complicate what doesn't need to be complicated." The temperature in his voice shifted colder than the one he used for strangers. Something flickered behind his eyes, a mix of frustration and something else I hadn't seen before. Ownership. The refusal came out simply. "I'm not signing anything until I've reviewed every detail." His restraint cracked. "Reviewed, Dad, you don't have the clarity for this anymore. You can't even manage your accounts. You think you're going to handle this paperwork?" That sentence landed with a weight nothing else had matched. The suggestion that my mind was gone, said openly without hesitation, cut deeper than the rest of it. Lydia didn't even glance at him in warning. She let it stand. A knock interrupted. An administrative clerk stepped in holding a clipboard. "Mr. Monroe, the initial processing for your capacity evaluation has started. Since your son filed the request during the night shift, we've moved it to preliminary review." Preliminary review. The words rang through me. This wasn't theoretical anymore. With a few more steps, a single panel of strangers could decide I wasn't fit to control my own life. I thanked the clerk with a calmness even I didn't expect. She left quickly, sensing the tension. Evan leaned in. "This is why we're trying to help you. You can't handle this alone." The lie was almost elegant in its confidence. A request formed in my mind so clearly it surprised me. "Bring me a laptop." Evan frowned. "You don't need that. Everything here is taken care of. The old discipline surfaced, the one I used to steady a household when grief first threatened to swallow it." I said, "Bring me a laptop." He didn't move. "Evan, bring it," I repeated, meeting his eyes. He finally exhaled sharply, muttered something under his breath, and left to find a nurse. Lydia stood, frozen hands clasped in a way that suggested she wasn't sure whether to intervene or retreat. A nurse rolled in a hospital laptop. Lydia stepped back, watching as I opened it. No shaking hands, no confusion. Just a man who'd reached a point where hesitation was no longer an option. The files I'd photographed loaded easily. They organized themselves into neat folders as I dragged them into place. Pages of forged signatures, unauthorized requests, timestamps, all laid out in a quiet, damning sequence. A message went out to my attorney. Full packet attached. Need immediate action. No explanations. No emotion. Only facts. Evan returned just in time to see the email send. His shoulders stiffened. "What did you just do?" "Exactly what I needed to." He stared at me for a long second before snatching the binder off the table. Lydia followed him out without glancing back. Their footsteps moved quickly down the corridor, sharper than when they'd arrived. The door clicked shut behind them. The email from my attorney arrived just after sunrise. He didn't dress it up with polite framing or soft language. His messages never did. "Caleb, a beneficiary change request was submitted to your retirement account 2 days before your surgery. Filed by Evan. Marked as urgent." The words settled slowly before the meaning hit with force. 2 days before my chest was opened, Evan had already positioned himself to inherit everything I'd worked for. Not after a discussion. Not after facing me. Before. Confidently. As if the outcome of my surgery didn't matter, I set the phone aside. Details don't stay isolated. Patterns form, motives tighten. This wasn't confusion. A soft knock. Then Marisa slipped in, checking the hall before approaching. Her posture carried caution, like she was risking something by being there. She placed a folded slip of paper beside my water cup. "A clerk heard your son arguing with administration," she murmured. "He wants them to speed up the capacity review. Thought you should know." Her eyes held warning, not pity. The note said only, "Your son requested immediate validation of incapacity, pressuring staff." My chest tightened, not from the incision, but something colder. Marisa straightened. "Don't sign anything. People lose everything when they're exhausted after surgery. One signature is all it takes." She hesitated. "I've seen this more often than you'd imagine." Her words stayed with me long after she left. A memory surfaced Evan in my kitchen months earlier, asking casual questions about life insurance. When pressed, he'd shrugged, "Just sorting paperwork." I'd dismissed the strangeness because parents do that, ignore what they don't want to believe. Now it fit perfectly with everything else. My phone rang. "Sharon, my neighbor, Evan says you've been struggling to recognize people. Is that true? Should someone check on you struggling to recognize people?" Another call followed from an old co-worker. "Heard you're not doing well. Maybe let Evan take over for a bit." They weren't attacking. They were repeating a story. Lydia always knew how to shape narratives. Once a rumor gets traction, it spreads on its own. Those conversations left a hollow ache. People who'd known me for years were suddenly unsure of my clarity, not because of what they'd seen, but because of what they'd been told. Isolation doesn't always need locked doors. Sometimes it comes through voices. Around noon, the door opened. Evan peeked in, gauging my state. Lydia stood behind him, scrolling. Evan asked if I needed anything. Polite tone, no warmth. Lydia stepped forward to adjust the blanket. "People are worried," she said. "You've been overwhelmed. We're trying to help before something goes wrong." Their lines were too polished to be genuine. They left once they'd delivered their script. The room settled around me, and the pieces arranged themselves: beneficiary changes, forged forms, restricted visitors, altered passwords, whispered stories. Together they formed a single, unmistakable shape. Letting them continue meant surrendering what I still had left: my choices, my dignity, my future, on my terms. Stopping them meant drawing a boundary my own son wouldn't accept. Marisa's warning replayed in my mind. People lose everything because they're tired. I was tired, but not finished. A path forward emerged with the same steadiness I'd relied on years ago after my wife died. Not dramatic, not rushed, just deliberate. I reached for the stack of papers beside me and sorted them by date. A simple ritual. Necessary. They moved me again in the early afternoon, this time to another recovery wing. The transfer was quick, but the atmosphere changed immediately. Fewer footsteps, fewer interruptions. A nurse set a small hospital laptop on the table and reminded me to call if I needed help accessing the system. Once she left, I opened the machine and signed into my financial portals. The login pages loaded slowly, almost hesitant, but the delay gave me room to steady my hands. Several dashboards appeared, each one familiar, yet the numbers had changed in ways I hadn't anticipated. A new alert blinked at the top of the retirement account. Transfer request submitted. Pending review. The date matched what my lawyer mentioned earlier, but the details dug deeper than I expected. A portion of my funds had been queued for relocation into a secondary investment managed by a designated agent. My name didn't appear anywhere in the request field. Instead, Evan's email sat in the authorization box. Scrolling through the login history revealed timestamps at hours I had been unconscious. Locations didn't match my home or the hospital. Someone had used another device entirely. An exhale slipped out before I caught it. Not panic recognition. This wasn't negligence or confusion. It was intentional, structured. I pulled every suspicious item into a folder and labeled it. Screenshots, scans, messages. The work steadied my thoughts. A man doesn't always control his health, but he can control his records if he moves fast. I sent my attorney a subject line with 2 words, freeze order. His reply came minutes later. He'd contact the bank's legal team. No small talk. I didn't offer any either. Something shifted in me. The fog of earlier grief, disappointment, disbelief thinned, leaving room for precision. My focus narrowed to action alone. Near dinner time, a message from Evan appeared. "Dad, you should rest. Don't make things harder on everyone. Let this go. Let this go." It read like a reprimand, not concern. He felt me slipping out of his grip. While I reread it, an alert flashed across the hospital laptop, someone attempting a password reset on my checking account. Blocked, but the timing spoke for itself. I sent my attorney an update and returned to sorting files. Dates lined up, forged approvals, altered entries. The more I arranged, the more the design behind it became visible. Marissa stepped in to check my vitals. Her eyes flicked toward the laptop. "Someone requested your visitor list," she murmured. "Not staff, a third party." Her tone tightened. They didn't explain. The detail hit harder than expected. Evan's steps now came with reach, indirect probing calculated. She adjusted the IV, then leaned closer. "You need to stay ahead of whatever they're planning." I nodded. She gave my shoulder a brief squeeze and left. After she disappeared down the hall, the room regained its focus. Every clue pointed to the same end. Evan wouldn't stop. With earlier attempts blocked, he'd press harder. Not fear urgency. I opened a new document and began outlining the timeline, the first forged signature, the capacity review, push, the financial interference, the visitor restrictions, the reset attempts. The list grew fast, a map of every pressure point he'd tried to exploit. At the bottom, the cursor blinked. I typed, "They assume I won't fight." The laptop hummed beside me. My meal tray remained untouched. I pushed it away and tightened a few entries in the timeline. The structure steadied me more than any medication. Down the hall, a door shut. Footsteps moved past, a cart rattled. The hospital carried on in its rhythm, while I rebuilt my strategy anchored by the simple understanding of what was at stake and what I refused to surrender. A final email went out to my attorney, attaching the updated bundle. Then I clicked the folder closed, rested my hand on the laptop for a moment, and went back to the timeline to record one more detail, this time with a steadiness I hadn't felt since before the surgery. A nurse entered just after dawn, with a clipboard tucked under her arm. She cleared her throat before speaking, as if preparing for resistance. "Mr. Monroe administration needs your signature on the capacity evaluation again. It was resubmitted overnight as an urgent request from your son." Her tone stayed neutral, but the implication didn't. Signing it would strip me of financial authority within hours. She placed the form beside the water cup and waited. I didn't touch it. She sensed the tension and excused herself. Before the door shut, my phone vibrated with an email from my attorney. "Evan submitted a joint account application with both your names. Pending review. Claims it's to support you during medical decline." I'm blocking it now. Another attempt. Another effort to slide me out of the equation with a smile plastered over paperwork. My pulse steadied rather than spiked. The pattern had become painfully predictable. The phone rang next. Aunt Carol. Her voice carried that mix of affection and judgment older relatives seemed to master. "Caleb, sweetheart, don't escalate things. Evan says you've been forgetful. He's trying to keep things stable. Just let him handle the paperwork. Forgetful. The word landed like a slap. Not shouted, not weaponized, but sewn into the conversation with care. She meant well. Most of them did. That made the sting worse. I didn't argue. Arguments feed rumors. A short answer ended the call. The next message came within minutes, this time from Evan. If you keep fighting, things will get ugly. You're not strong enough for this. Let me take over. No disguise, no softened phrasing. A warning wrapped as concern, but a threat nonetheless. I set the phone down to stop the vibration from running through my hand. By noon, a hospital administrator stepped inside. Your daughter-in-law signed a request limiting visitors, she said, for your emotional stability. Her fingers curled slightly around the edge of her folder, like she understood what she was delivering wasn't simple procedure. Maurice's name wouldn't appear on the approved list. Neither would anyone not handpicked by Evan and Lydia. Every direction I turned tightened the same net money, reputation, freedom, even access to the few people willing to be honest with me. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It accumulated steady and deliberate, the way snow stacks against a door until it no longer opens. They had waited for the moment when I was physically weakest, assuming I wouldn't have the strength to resist. For a brief second, a sharper ache rose beneath my ribs, a single question. How long had they assumed I no longer mattered? The thought passed. Resolve took its place. The line had been crossed days ago. Now they were sprinting far beyond it. Instead of confronting anyone, I asked the nurse to arrange a small meeting room and notify the contacts I had approved. She didn't press for reasons. Some professionals recognize trouble even when charts look normal. Word spread fast. By late afternoon, several relatives and 2 longtime friends gathered, confusion written across their faces. Some avoided eye contact, as if torn between versions of the truth. Others had clearly been primed by Evan. Evan walked in, last jaw tight. Lydia followed, arms folded. Their confidence faltered slightly when they saw the stack of documents on the table. I didn't make a speech. I laid the evidence out one item at a time. The forged signature, the evaluation request filed at midnight, the attempted beneficiary change screenshots of unauthorized logins, the joint account application timestamps from hours when I wasn't conscious, a log of every irregularity since surgery. Each page landed with a soft tap that carried more weight than any argument. Murmurs passed through the group. Someone whispered, "That can't be real," but the documents offered no escape. Evan tried to cut in. "Dad doesn't understand how these forms." I lifted a hand, just enough to stop the sentence. The room shifted with it. The audience was no longer his. An uncle leaned forward. "Evan, why would you file these without telling him Lydia stepped in? He's been overwhelmed. We were trying to protect him." The excuse collapsed immediately, thin, rehearsed. A cousin pointed at the signature. "That isn't his handwriting." Evan's posture sagged. "I didn't forge anything. Maybe staff, maybe someone else." His voice wavered under the weight of his own story. Then came another page login history traced directly to his address. His throat tightened. Partial truths dripped out, half denials, half admissions. Each attempt to shift blame only exposed more. Lydia flushed. Evan's breathing quickened. Confusion drained from the room. Certainty took its place. Their narrative dissolved in front of the very people they had counted on to support it. No anger rose in me. No satisfaction. Only a clean, grounded clarity. I returned the documents to the folder. My attorney texted the freeze order was active, and my authority remained intact. Later, the discharge papers weren't the only forms waiting. My attorney arrived with a thick folder, almost like another medical file. "These revoke every authorization Evan and Lydia held," he said. "If you're ready, we'll sign them one at a time." No hesitation surfaced. My signature moved across each page: termination of beneficiary privileges, cancellation of power of attorney removal, of financial access reversal of joint requests. The pen moved with a steady rhythm, guided not by fury, but by the solidness of finally standing on ground no one else controlled. When the last document dried, he nodded. "I'll file these immediately. You'll have full protection by this afternoon." He wasn't finished. A second form appeared, this one shorter, stamped with the seal of the state. "This authorizes an investigation into elder financial abuse. It's optional, but I recommend it. What they did wasn't just unethical, it broke the law." The paper sat between us. Not a weapon, not revenge, just accountability. My signature landed neatly at the bottom. He collected the stack, tucked it into his briefcase, and left with a firm squeeze on my shoulder. By evening, word had traveled faster than I expected. Relatives who once believed Evan's stories now kept their distance from him entirely. Aunt Carol sent a message full of fragmented apologies. A cousin wrote, "I didn't know. I'm sorry. We should have asked you directly." No bitterness rose while reading them. People follow the version of events they're given, until truth forces its way in. Lydia faced her own reckoning. Hospital administration recorded her false statements in the system, and whatever reputation she'd carefully built around town dimmed almost overnight. No one said it to her face, I'm sure, but Portland is a small enough place for news to travel efficiently. Once cleared to leave the hospital, I didn't return to the old house. My attorney had already arranged the keys to a small unit in Selwood, a simple apartment above a bookstore, with just enough space for a bed, a desk, and a kitchen nook. No clutter, no memories waiting in corners. Just a clean stretch of life, without anyone hovering over my decisions. Carrying a single duffel bag into the apartment felt strange, like stepping into a pared-down version of myself. The place wasn't large, but it offered something the house hadn't given me in a long time: privacy, without suspicion, peace, without monitoring choices that didn't require negotiation. A week later, I met with the director of a non-profit installing clean water systems in rural communities. He'd heard from an old coworker that I understood mechanical troubleshooting. "We just need someone who can stabilize broken filtration units and advise volunteers," he said. "Flexible hours, no rigid deadlines." It was exactly what I needed: steady work without pressure or scrutiny. The routine formed quickly. 2 afternoons a week, I sorted replacement parts, repaired, donated pumps, and walked younger volunteers through basic diagnostics. No one questioned my judgment or hinted that age made me less capable. The absence of interference felt almost like a luxury. Evenings in the new place carried a calmer rhythm. I cooked simple meals, tinkered with the tools I'd brought, and sometimes sat by the window watching people pass with grocery bags or dogs tugging at leashes, ordinary movement, nothing more. My phone, however, refused that steadiness. Evan called first, then again, then repeatedly. Voicemails stacked up: "Dad, we need to talk. Things got out of hand. You misunderstood. Let me explain." Then the tone shifted. "I'm sorry, please answer. People are judging us. Don't do this to your own family." The last message ended with a shaky breath. "Fear not remorse." Lydia's texts trickled in. "We didn't want to hurt you." I panicked. "You know Evan has a lot on him. Just give us another chance." None of it altered the truth. Their apologies weren't admissions, they were bargaining chips. One evening after work, I scrolled through their messages like items passing on a conveyor belt. I didn't delete them. I didn't respond. I simply recognized them for what they were: attempts to pull me back into the cycle that had nearly destroyed everything I'd built. The last text read, "We're lost without you." I watched the screen dim, then held the power button until the phone shut off. No anger followed. No triumph. What settled in was something steadier, a sense of finally stepping out of a storm I should have left long before.